In 1953, the United States made a decision about Iran. Iran has been making the United States pay for it ever since. Here is what happened. An Iranian prime minister named Mohammad Mossadegh did something that terrified London and Washington. He nationalized Iran's oil. He said the petroleum under Iranian soil belonged to the Iranian people, not to the British corporations pumping it out. He was elected, he was legitimate, he was popular, and the CIA destroyed him anyway. The operation was called Ajax. The British called their half Operation Boot. Together, they paid street thugs to riot, bribed military officers to switch sides, and fabricated propaganda that painted a democratic leader as a communist threat. In August 1953, Mossadegh was overthrown. He was placed under house arrest, where he would die, and in his place, the CIA installed a king, a 33-year-old monarch named Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. The Shah was grateful. He gave 80% of Iran's oil back to the Americans and the British. He bought billions in American weapons. He threw a party at the ancient ruins of Persepolis to celebrate 2,500 years of Persian monarchy that cost somewhere between $100 million and $200 million. Guests ate roast peacock and drank 5,000 bottles of vintage wine flown in from Paris, while in villages 50 miles away, children had no clean water. And when Iranians protested, the Shah sent Savak. Savak was his secret police, trained by the CIA, armed by the throne. They operated their own prisons. Their interrogation techniques included electric shock, whipping, nail extraction, sleep deprivation, acid dripped into nostrils, and a device the prisoners named the Apollo, an electric chair fitted with a metal helmet that amplified the victims' screams inward while muffling them outward. One former Savak agent, testifying at a revolutionary tribunal, wept as he described torturing hundreds. Savak did not just silence dissent, it manufactured rage. Every fingernail they pulled created 10 revolutionaries. By the late 1970s, Iran was not a country. It was a grenade with the pin half out. On September 8, 1978, a Friday, the Shah's soldiers opened fire on demonstrators at Jaleh Square in Tehran. The government said 64 died. The opposition said thousands. The exact number does not matter. What matters is the name Iranians gave that day, Black Friday. After Black Friday, there was no going back. The Shah was finished. He just did not know it yet. 4 months later, in January 1979, the Shah fled Iran. He left behind his palaces, his peacock throne, his secret police, and 37 million people who hated him. On February 1st, a chartered Air France Boeing 747 carrying 150 passengers landed at Tehran's Mehrabad airport. Aboard was a 76-year-old Shia cleric who had spent 15 years in exile. His name was Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. A journalist on the plane asked him what he felt returning to Iran after so long. Khomeini's answer was a single word: nothing. He was not sentimental, he was calculating. Within 10 days, the old government was gone. Iran was an Islamic republic. Khomeini was its supreme leader, and the 27-year American project to control Iran through a puppet king was ash. Now pay attention to the next part, because this is where a humanitarian gesture lights the fuse that burns for 444 days. In October 1979, President Jimmy Carter allowed the exiled Shah to enter the United States for cancer treatment. Carter's motives were medical. Iran's interpretation was political. To revolutionary Tehran, America was sheltering the butcher, protecting the men whose Savak had tortured their brothers and sisters for a quarter century, hiding the tyrant behind the same flag that had installed him. The anger that followed was not spontaneous. It was organized. November 4th, 1979, a Sunday, the first day of the work week in Tehran. At approximately 10 a.m., between 300 and 500 students, calling themselves Muslim student followers of the Imam's line, approached the walls of the United States Embassy. The embassy compound was 27 acres. It had its own buildings, its own power, its own communications. It was a small American city inside Tehran. The students carried bolt cutters, pictures of Khomeini, and a plan they believed would last 48 hours. They cut the chains on the main gate. They climbed the walls. Iranian police watched and did nothing. Inside, American Marines used tear gas. Firearms were not authorized, while diplomats upstairs scrambled to shred and burn classified documents. They fed papers into shredders and industrial burn bags. The machines could not keep up. Later, the Iranians would hand the shredded strips to carpet weavers, women trained to reconstruct intricate patterns thread by thread, and those weavers would reassemble CIA documents with the same patience they used to make Persian rugs. They published the results in 54 volumes. The Marines held the compound for 3 hours. Then it was over. 66 Americans were taken, blindfolded, hands bound, marched through corridors and courtyards while thousands outside chanted for their deaths. One Marine sergeant, James Lopez, had single-handedly held the consulate building, using tear gas to keep the mob at bay while he herded 60 people, Americans and Iranian visa applicants, upstairs and out through a side door in small groups. He got several Americans out before he himself was captured. When he was finally released 444 days later, he told his parents he'd been kept in closet-sized rooms and beaten repeatedly. Then he said, "At least I got some of the others out, right?" The students expected Khomeini to order them out within 2 days. Instead, he endorsed them. The temporary demonstration became a permanent siege. The Iranian Prime Minister's cabinet resigned. The country was now ruled directly by the Revolutionary Council under Khomeini. And 52 Americans, after 13 women, African Americans, and 1 Sikh hostage were released as a propaganda gesture, became prisoners of a revolution that had discovered the most powerful weapon on earth was not a bomb. It was a camera. They blindfolded the hostages and marched them before television cameras. The footage ran on every American network, every night for months. ABC News created a nightly broadcast to cover the crisis. It was called The Iran Crisis, America Held Hostage. It would eventually become Nightline. A country that had not known collective fury since Pearl Harbor was watching its citizens humiliated in real time, and it could do absolutely nothing about it. Inside the embassy, the treatment was systematic. Some hostages were locked in windowless basement cells they called the Mushroom Inn. They were forbidden from speaking, forbidden from looking at each other. Guards believed eye contact was a method of exchanging signals. They slept in the same clothes for weeks. Some were denied baths for 3 months. One hostage, Robert Blacker, wore the same 3-piece suit he was captured in for the entire 444 days. He slept in it for 45 consecutive nights. The psychological torture was relentless. Guards played Russian roulette with revolvers held to the heads of 2 bound American women, trying to force them to open classified files. A secretary named Terry Tedford had a gun pointed at her head for 9 hours straight. When her captors told her to talk or die, she told them they were a bunch of sons of bitches and to go ahead and shoot. Mock executions. White-masked guards lined hostages against walls, kicked their legs apart, and clicked rifle bolts behind them. One hostage, Richard Quinn, standing spread-eagled, said the Lord's Prayer and tried to give himself last rites. He waited for the shot. It never came. After 45 minutes, they were taken away. Economic counselor Moorhead Kennedy was dragged outside on a freezing night, a gun jammed into his back, pressed against a wall. Guards fired blank cartridges next to his ear. Malcolm Culp, a communication specialist, spent 374 of his 444 days in solitary confinement because he kept trying to escape. They beat him every time they caught him. He kept trying. Michael Metrinko, the Farsi-speaking political officer, spent roughly 10 months in solitary. He survived by exercising obsessively, 1,000 sit-ups a day, running in place for hours. When a guard called him an insult in Farsi, not knowing Metrinko understood, Metrinko shot back, "Shut up yourself, you son of a Persian prostitute." They pulled him off the final bus to freedom and beat him. The bus left without him. They had to send a Mercedes-Benz to take him to the airport separately. And on the other side of the world, the most powerful country in human history sat paralyzed. Carter tried everything. He froze $8 billion in Iranian assets. He expelled Iranian diplomats. He imposed economic sanctions. He took Iran to the International Court of Justice. He sent envoys. He tried back channels. Nothing worked. Every diplomatic initiative crashed against the same wall. Khomeini did not want to negotiate. The hostages were not a problem to be solved. They were a weapon to be wielded. By April 1980, Carter was desperate. Over the objections of Secretary of State Cyrus Vance, he authorized a military rescue mission, Operation Eagle Claw. The plan was complicated, which meant there were 100 ways for it to fail. 8 Navy RH-53D helicopters would fly 600 miles from the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz across the Iranian desert to a staging point called Desert 1. There, they would meet C-130 transport planes carrying Delta Force operators and fuel. They needed a minimum of 6 working helicopters. They sent 8, because planners knew the desert would take its toll. The helicopters flew into a haboob, a wall of suspended dust 200 feet high and miles wide. Visibility dropped to 0. One helicopter turned back with a cracked rotor blade. Another was abandoned in the desert after its navigation system died. A third landed at Desert 1 with hydraulic failure. 6 helicopters required, 5 remaining. Colonel Charlie Beckwith, the Delta Force commander, a man who had literally been shot in the stomach with a .50 caliber round in Vietnam and survived, made the hardest call of his life: abort. Then, in the confusion of withdrawal, an RH-53D repositioning on the ground drifted into a C-130 loaded with jet fuel and men. The collision produced a fireball visible for miles. 5 Air Force crew members burned alive inside the C-130. 3 Marines died in the helicopter. 8 Americans dead. No hostages rescued. The survivors flew out and left everything behind: equipment, weapons, classified mission plans, the bodies of their dead, and 8 intact helicopters, which Iranian television displayed to the world the next morning alongside the charred American corpses. Secretary of State Vance resigned in protest. The hostage-takers, spooked, scattered the 52 Americans to secret locations across the country. And Carter's presidency, already wounded, was effectively dead. Iran celebrates the Eagle Claw failure as a national holiday. They still do. The crisis ground on for another 9 months. The nightly hostage count became background noise in American life. Yellow ribbons, started by Penelope Langen, wife of the embassy's senior diplomat, appeared on trees, fences, and car antennas across the country. The Shah died of cancer in Cairo in July 1980, removing one of Iran's original demands, but the hostages stayed. On November 4, 1980, 1 year to the day after the embassy fell, Ronald Reagan defeated Jimmy Carter in a landslide. The hostage crisis had not just destroyed a foreign policy, it had destroyed a presidency. Negotiations through Algerian intermediaries finally produced the Algiers Accords. The United States agreed to unfreeze approximately $8 billion in Iranian assets and pledged non-interference in Iranian affairs. The terms were signed on January 19, 1981, Carter's last full day as president. What happened next is either coincidence or the most calculated insult in modern diplomatic history. On January 20, 1981, at 12:33 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, exactly 33 minutes after Ronald Reagan completed the oath of office, 2 Algerian planes carrying all 52 American hostages lifted off from Tehran's Mehrabad airport. They would not leave Iranian airspace while Jimmy Carter was still president. The Iranians waited until the man who had spent every day of his last year trying to free them was no longer the man in charge. Then they opened the door. The hostages landed at Rhein-Main Air Base in West Germany. Thousands were waiting. A chorus of "God Bless America" filled the tarmac. Men in crumpled suits and broken bodies stepped off the plane and onto free soil. 444 days, 52 hostages, 8 servicemen dead in the desert, a presidency ended, and a wound between two nations that, as of this writing, has never been sutured. The embassy compound in Tehran still stands. Its walls are covered in anti-American murals. It is a museum now. The Iranians call it the den of spies. The students who stormed it became politicians. One of them became Tehran's mayor. Another became a vice president. The hostages came home to ticker-tape parades, but parades end. Many struggled with post-traumatic stress for decades. Marriages collapsed, careers dissolved. The government initially compensated them $50 per day of captivity, $22,000 for 444 days of blindfolds and mock executions and Russian roulette and sleeping in the same suit for 45 nights. One of the hostages, William Keogh, made a phone call to his brother from Germany. After everything, after the beatings, the isolation, the mushroom inn, the mock firing squads, the Iranian guards playing with loaded weapons pointed at his chest, Keogh said, "We won this thing. We really beat them around mentally. They had the guns, but we won." 444 days. The guns were never enough.